In the quiet hills of Kentucky, nestled between whispering trees and winding creeks, stands the ghostly memory of a once welcoming place, the Millbrook Inn, now long abandoned, its foundation barely visible beneath moss and ivy, but nearby lie 43 graves, weathered and sunken into the earth. No tombstones mark them, no names are etched in stone. Only the whispers of the past tell their story. It was the year 1847. The United States was expanding westward. Kentucky, full of promise and peril, drew travelers in search of fortune, farmland, or simply a new beginning. And in a small hamlet just outside Millbrook, to Sisters Elisa and Margaret, Cunningham opened the doors to an inn like no other. Sound effect, crackling fire, soft footsteps. The Millbrook Inn was not grand. It was modest, with creaky floors, patchwork quilts, and the smell of fresh bread always in the air. But what made it special was the love. Elisa and Margaret Cunningham were not just innkeepers, they were caregivers, listeners, and some sahir. In a time when cholera, typhoid, and influenza traveled as freely as the people, the sisters offered not just beds and meals, but comfort, care, and compassion. Cue somber violin music in late 1847. An outbreak swept through the county. It hit travelers hardest. Many were already sick when they arrived. With no hospitals nearby, the Millbrook Inn became an impromptu sanctuary. Some recovered under the sisters' watch. Many did, and single quotes. Eliza wrote in a no-loss letter to a local pastor, "We do what we can. They are strangers when they arrive, but they die with someone holding their hand. No family to claim the bodies, no undertakers willing to risk infection." So, the sisters dug the graves themselves. Sound effect, shovel digging softly, 43 in total, each buried behind the inn, marked only by a simple wooden cross, most of which rotted away within decades. The sisters recorded each death in a cloth-bound journal, listing only descriptions and final words. That journal vanished in a fire in 1902. The story might have been forgotten, if not for the oral histories passed down by Millbrook locals. According to these tales, the sisters never left. Even after death, visitors to the site have reported feeling warmth near the burial ground, as if watched over. Some say they hear humming soft lullabies once sung to dying travelers. And others, they claim to have seen two women in shawls, moving silently between the unmarked graves, brushing away leaves, still caring, even in death. Soft silence, then ambient wind noise. In 1863, both sisters succumbed to illness themselves. Their bodies lie among the others, no special place, no grand monument, just two more among the 43, but in truth, they are the heart of them all. Today Millbrook Inn is gone, but the legend of the Cunningham Sisters endures. They didn't offer gold or grand hospitality. What they offered was far more rare love, freely given to strangers who died far from home, and in doing so, they ensured that though the names are lost, the kindness is never forgotten. Closing music, gentle, hopeful tune. So if you ever wander the forests of Kentucky, and you stumble upon a quiet hill near the old Millbrook Trail, listen. The wind might carry a song, and if you feel warm for no reason at all, you've just been welcomed by the Cunninghams. In the heart of Kentucky, where the woods grow thick and time moves slow. There's a forgotten clearing at the edge of what used to be Millbrook. There, nature has taken back what man built, but something lingers. It's not the crumbling stone foundation of an old inn, nor the brittle, rotted fence that once enclosed it. No, what lingers is something else. Just beyond the ruins lies a patch of ground where the grass grows uneven. Hollow spots in the earth, covered in leaves, betray their secret. Beneath them lie 43 unmarked graves and the legend of two sisters who defied fear to offer love until the very end. This is the story of the Millbrook and the Cunningham Sisters, and the visitors who never left. Act I. The inn at the edge of the wilderness. Cue soundscape, birds, soft breeze, a horse in the distance. In the early 1800s, Millbrook was a tiny dot on the map, a stop along the wilderness road, traveled by settlers, soldiers, and seekers of all kinds. It was dangerous terrain full of wild animals, outlaws, and disease. And right off that dusty road stood a modest inn, a two-story log house with a stone chimney and a barn out back. The inn was run by Elisa and Margaret Cunningham, two unmarried sisters in their 30s, known by locals for their kind nature and odd habits. Some said they were spinsters, others said they were saints, but everyone agreed, no one was turned away at the Millbrook Inn. Whether you were a farmer with no coin, a runaway slave, or a wounded soldier, the sisters gave you bread, rest, and warmth. They lived simply, no servants, no luxuries, and always together. Act 2. The year the sickness came, music shifts, darker with low strings in late summer of 1847. Sickness swept through Kentucky. Some say it was typhoid fever. Others believe it was a deadly strain of cholera carried by riverboats and wagons. The townspeople feared it like wildfire, and rightly so. People who showed symptoms were shunned. Inns closed their doors. Churches banned gatherings, but the Cunninghams, they opened, theirs wider. Travelers began arriving at Millbrook Inn with fevers, shaking hands, and sunken eyes. Many were on the brink of death. Word spread quickly there was a place where the sick were still taken in, and more came. Eliza wrote, in her last surviving letter to a cousin, they arrive with death in their breath. We do not fear them. We give them soup. We clean their wounds. We hold them as they pass. This is God's work, whether he sees it or not. Act 3-43 Goodbyes. The sisters recorded 43 deaths between late September and December of 1847. Most were buried the same day they passed. There were no doctors, no undertakers willing to approach the sick house. So the sisters did it all, carried the bodies, dug the graves, read simple prayers over strangers whose names they barely knew. Some were children, others were Civil War deserters, some were immigrants who spoke no English. Their last words a mystery. The sisters recorded brief notes in a small black journal. Man, 30s, died calling for Maria. Boy 9, fever, gave thanks before sleep. Young woman, name unknown, sang in dreams, but the journal, like the inn, would not survive the years. It was lost in a fire in 1902. Act 4, the sisters' final days. By December, both sisters had begun to show signs of illness. Margaret, first she refused to rest. Eliza begged her to lie down, but Margaret kept caring for the remaining sick until she collapsed. She died 3 days later. Eliza lived 2 more weeks. Her last recorded act was burying a man from Tennessee, his name unknown. Then, on a freezing December morning, she lay in the same bed she had offered so many strangers, and closed her eyes forever. A neighbor, James Weller, found the inn silent days later. He buried Eliza next to her sister, at the back of the property, in the same ground as the others. He placed no stone. He said, simply, they are at home now. Act 5, Ghosts and Memory Sound. Night wind, owl call. Over the next few decades, the Millbrook Inn stood empty. Some said it was cursed. Others swore it was holy ground. Children dared each other to visit the graves at night. Many came back saying the same thing. They saw 2 women, dressed in shawls, walking the field, brushing leaves off the graves, humming lullabies. Some travelers, lost in the woods, claimed to see a lantern flickering near the inn ruins. When they approached, it vanished. By the 1920s, the inn collapsed. Nature reclaimed the structure, and most locals forgot the story. But hikers, hunters, and paranormal investigators still speak of the 43 Souls Hill. Visitors report feelings of calm warmth, even in winter. A few claim to hear whispers, or feel a hand on their shoulder when they kneel near the unmarked graves. Act V, Legacy of the Cunningham SWAT is a haunting, if not memory made real. Eliza and Margaret Cunningham had no children, no descendants, no markers for their own graves, but in offering love, kindness, and humanity to strangers in their final moments, they achieved something greater than legacy. They created a sanctuary. In a world that feared the sick, they held them. In a time when death meant loneliness, they gave comfort. And even now, long after their bones have turned to dust, the stories live on, passed from one voice to another, because real love never dies, it stays. Even in a clearing in the Kentucky woods. Closing music, hopeful theme with soft strings, so if you're ever near the old Millbrook Trail, and the trees hush, and the wind grows still, remember the sisters who gave everything to those who had nothing. And if you feel a warmth in your chest, or hear a soft song in the air, you've been touched by the love of the Cunningham Sisters. Time passed, the story of the Millbrook Inn faded from public record, but it never quite disappeared. It lived on in whispers, in journals tucked into attic trunks, in the memory of old-timers who'd say, never walk that hill after dark, unless you're ready to feel a hand in yours. Local legends began to grow around the place. A Civil War widow claimed her dying son had been lost in a snowstorm in 1871. She followed a glowing light through the woods and found him asleep, safe, wrapped in a blanket near the inn ruins. He said to women brought him tea. No footprints were found. In 1938, a traveling preacher wrote in his diary, stopped near Millbrook, prayed near graves, felt a strange peace overcome me, like I was not alone, slept the best I had in years. And in 1974, a paranormal team visited the site. Their equipment malfunctioned near the burial ground. The only audio they captured, a low voice humming what seemed like an old lullaby. Act 8, the gentle haunting cue, ethereal ambience, soft chimes. Most hauntings come with fear, cold spots, slamming doors, screams in the night, but not here. The spirits of Millbrook Inn are different. Visitors describe a gentle presence, not a terrifying one. Some speak of a warm breeze on a windless day. Others say they feel comforted near the unmarked graves, like someone is watching over them with love, not menace. A local schoolteacher who hikes the woods every fall said, "It's the only place where I feel like I'm being hugged, without anyone there." Psychics who visited report the same thing, a deep sadness, but also resilience and tenderness. As if the souls resting there, especially Eliza and Margaret, have chosen to stay not because they're trapped, but because they still care. They weren't afraid of death in life. Why would they be afraid of it now? Act 9, the lost names. The found humanity narrator. The 43 people buried at Millbrook Inn have no names. There are no surviving records of who they were, no family trees, no descendants searching for them, no churches claimed them, no governments honored them, and yet, they are remembered because of 2 women who treated each one as worthy of dignity. And maybe that's what haunts us most. Not ghosts, but the silence that follows when human lives vanish without recognition. But, in that silence, the Cunninghams placed a song, a lullaby for the forgotten, a light for the lost. And now we sing it back by telling their story. Act X, modern efforts. Quiet honors in recent years. Local historians and preservationists have begun quietly working to restore the memory of the Millbrook Inn. The site remains unmarked, partly out of respect, and partly because no official record confirms its location. But several GP-tagged gravesites match old property lines and anecdotal directions. A Kentucky heritage group is seeking to place a small plaque at the forest's edge to the sisters who offered love, and to the 43 they buried with honor. A university team has begun work on digital reconstructions of the inn using 19th century maps, descriptions, and even tree ring data from the area. Their goal is to allow visitors to walk through a virtual Millbrook Inn, seeing the rooms, the hearth, the modest kitchen where Margaret stirred broth for the dying, and in small ways, people are honoring them still. One woman leaves white roses at the site each spring. A retired nurse once wrote, "I became who I am because of the story of the Cunninghams, to care for others when everyone else runs away. That's true strength." Act She, what the Cunninghams teach us today. Narrator, softly, reflectively. Not all heroes wear medals. Not all saints are canonized. Some are quiet sisters, in a forgotten county, in a fever-ridden year, who simply refused to look away when others were suffering. In a world that often honors power, they chose compassion. In a society that turned its back on the sick, they held their hands. In a century that forgot them, they still remembered others. Their story is not one of ghosts, but of grace. A grace that lingers still. Closing music returns, hopeful and emotional. Slow build to the 43 buried at Millbrook Inn. You are not forgotten. Though your names are lost to time, your lives were witnessed. You were seen, you were loved. And in that final moment, someone was there. Someone whispered comfort. Someone stood by your grave, with hands in the dirt, and said, "You mattered." And to Eliza and Margaret Cunningham, may we carry your story like a lantern through our own dark nights. May we love with such courage. May we too be the kind of souls that never leave, because we are still needed. Most spirits, we're told, remain because of unfinished business, vengeance, sorrow, tragedy. But the Cunninghams, they stayed because of unfinished love. They didn't die with regrets. They died with purpose. And maybe that purpose, giving peace to the lost, was so strong, it anchored them not in pain, but in devotion. The inn may have crumbled, the guests long gone. But perhaps Margaret still checks the windows at dusk. Perhaps Eliza still folds the blankets of visitors we can't see. Not because they're trapped, but because they choose to keep serving those who have nowhere else to go. In a world increasingly quick to forget its wounded, they remain the memory. Act 13, a story passed down in silence. Narrator, some stories aren't written in books, they're passed in looks, in tones, in a grandma's warning not to camp near the hollow. In Millbrook, no one teaches the tale of the Cunninghams in school, but ask around quietly at a gas station, in a quilting group, after a funeral, and someone always knows. My mother used to say they still walk. When I lost my husband, I went out there. I just sat, and I didn't feel alone. These aren't ghost stories. They're not meant to scare. They're memories, whispered with respect. even reverence. And maybe that's how the sisters wanted it. Not fame, not monuments. Just for us to remember to care. Act 14. What the inn became, the Millbrook Inn, was never just a building. It was a threshold between the living and the dying, between despair and dignity. Some believe places absorb the energy of what happened there. That stone and wood carry memory. If so, then the foundation of the inn still holds something sacred. Some visitors report feeling as though the world slows there. Birds quiet. Phones lose signal. A sense of timelessness takes over. As if, just for a moment, you step out of our world and into theirs. A world where pain is met with presence, where no one dies alone, where love doesn't demand recognition, it just gives and gives and gives. Act 15. Modern Reflections. A nurse's journal. In 2018, a nurse from Lexington named Camille Hartman visited the site after hearing about the sisters at a storytelling event. She wrote in her private journal, "I didn't expect to feel much. I don't even believe in ghosts. But when I stood there, I wept. Not because of what was lost, but because of what was given. Every day I go to work, I think of them. I think, would Eliza run from this patient? Would Margaret judge this man for his tattoos, or smell, or silence? The answer's always no, and neither do I. I think I've found my patron saints." Camille now leaves a note each year at the site, tucked into a crevice of the old inn's foundation. Short letters that begin the same way. To the women who taught me what care really means. Act the 16th. The fire and the journal. We often wonder, how do legends survive when the records are gone? The Cunningham Sisters' black cloth-bound journal, the one that listed the final words of 43 strangers, was lost in fire in 1902. Some believe the fire was accidental, a chimney spark during a storm. Others say it was intentionally destroyed, burned by a descendant ashamed of the family's association with illness, death, and so-called witchy women. But fragments of it survive in oral retellings. Stories passed down not through ink but through voices, through love. We may never recover that journal. But maybe we don't need to, because the most important entries are not the names, but the acts, and those remain. Act ZV. Pilgrimage to the graves. Each year, a few quiet pilgrims still visit the old inn site. No tour buses, no fanfare, just those who've heard the whispers, who come to sit, to listen, to leave behind their burdens on the forest floor. Some leave tokens, a silver coin, a crocheted cross, a cup of herbal tea, a few light candles. Others just sit in silence, eyes closed. What are they seeking? Maybe nothing. Maybe just to be near a place where pure love once lived and still echoes. Because in a world exhausted by noise, conflict, and grief, it's not horror that haunts us most. It's tenderness, and few places hold as much as the 43 graves of Millbrook. In Act 18. Closing. We remember you. Final music, orchestral swell, slow and emotional. Narrator softly, with warmth. We don't know your names, not the man who begged for Maria, not the boy who gave thanks through fever, not the mother who died with lullabies on her lips. But we remember you, and we remember the hands that buried you with care. We remember the voices that whispered comfort. We remember the two sisters who saw your humanity. When the world saw danger, we remember love. Real, fierce, inconvenient love. And we promise, as long as we speak your story, you are not forgotten.